She was incredibly charming. She was attractive. I don't even want to entertain why she did what she did.
You had a beautiful home, you didn't work, you had cleaning ladies, you pool people, you had cars, money, you had it all.
Monica Sementilli. Homicide investigators say she conspired to murder her husband. They said when they talked to her, she lied and lied.
I was hearing about break-ins.
At the time, in that particular area, there were a lot of what they call knock-knock burglaries.
I was hearing about home invasion.
It was assumed that it was a couple guys that had jumped the fence and it was a robbery.
What happened on the day of the murder?
That night, at about 5-something, I got a text saying, "Come to my house, I need you."
I get the phone and I'm in disbelief, saying, what? Because I can't believe it.
And it was Monica. She was crying and distraught, and she was saying, "They killed Fabio."
Fabio Sementilli. Fabio was an executive in the beauty business. He was a former hairdresser.
My queen, he called her. He would come home, drop his bags, sweep her off her feet, and dance with her.
He was the love of her life.
And he loved his kids. It looked like a textbook break-in. A robbery gone wrong.
There was immense suspicion as to the explanation of a robbery, from my perspective.
Didn't sound right.
Didn't sound right.
We're here to announce the arrest of 2 individuals in connection with the murder of Fabio Sementilli. Over the past several months, investigators have developed information and identified Robert Baker and Monica Sementilli, who was the wife of our homicide victim, as responsible for his murder.
Detectives say Monica Sementilli had been having an affair. Her boyfriend was arrested and charged with murder. But so was she.
I'm like, "You sure?"
There's no effing way.
Now, the boyfriend has been convicted. He has been sentenced to life without parole. And Monica Sementilli is about to go on trial for murder. According to the prosecutor, she was the one with all the information and intelligence, and she fed it to him, and he was the executioner. The daughters she shared with Fabio are standing by her.
We want to clearly state that we will continue to stand by our mother as we have done for the last 6 years, and we will fight for her innocence.
The defense is going to say there is no hard evidence. By the way, there's no evidence that Monica Sementilli conspired to kill her husband.
In 2017, Monica Sementilli had an enviable life, a luxurious house with a pool and a Porsche in the driveway in a posh area of Los Angeles. But after spending almost 7 years behind bars, waiting through legal delays and COVID, Monica Sementilli is scheduled to go on trial for the murder of her husband, celebrity hairdresser and beauty executive Fabio Sementilli. It's a tangled story. Her defenders say Monica Sementilli is an innocent victim. But if you believe prosecutors, she's a criminal. Authorities describe a case of lust, greed, and murder, whichever it is. The drama unfolded on January 23rd, 2017.
There were fire trucks outside of her house, and I was like, oh gosh. There was no police yet. It was just the first responders.
Elise Bluell was a friend of Monica Sementilli's. We spoke with her in 2018. She says Monica texted her to come over the night Fabio was killed.
It was her and her daughters. She just kept saying that he's gone, that I'm not a wife anymore. I just held her. I just held her. It was so painful. Just the weeping, the not being able to breathe. She was beyond devastated, beyond devastated.
Monica's husband, Fabio, was slumped over his chair by the pool. Had you seen the body? Had you seen?
Didn't. I just wanted to be the best possible comfort. I didn't know how to comfort that. She couldn't speak in complete sentences until like the 4th day.
Detectives quickly learned the victim, Fabio Sementilli, had been a superstar in the beauty business.
Welcome to Hollywood. You're on.
He was a happy man.
Whoa!
We spoke with those who knew him best in 2017. Fabio's sister, Mirella Rota.
And he wanted everybody around him happy.
All right, and now it'll go backwards, you're saying?
Yeah. The best way to describe my dad
Oh my God, that is the...
really is like a cup of coffee in the morning.
Luigi Sementilli, Fabio's son from an earlier marriage.
He gets you going, he lifts your spirits, he gets you determined to charge the mountain of life.
Did your friends say, hey, Luigi, is that your dad?
Absolutely, yeah. It was kind of a fun thing. You know, it's hard to avoid him when you type in Sementilli on Google. It's very hard. In fact, when you type in my name, Luigi Sementilli, the first thing that comes up is his profile. Yeah.
Fabio and his sister Mirella began cutting hair in Toronto, Canada.
Good, that's beautiful, I love it.
That's where Fabio met Monica, a customer and makeup artist he married in 1997.
The wedding was incredible.
Restaurateur Joe Mercurio grew up with Fabio. He was best man at Fabio's wedding to Monica.
We were dancing right to the very end.
We saw their relationship as a love story.
Fabio was also in love with his career. He and his sister Mirella were getting famous.
Hey, welcome, Bob.
Look at this.
In 2008, Fabio was promoted to an executive job at the beauty giant Wella.
I'd love to recommend something new.
And moved his family to LA. Pete Castellanos was Fabio's colleague.
What happened was the opportunity to really allow the things that he wanted for his family to come to life by taking on a bigger role.
He and Monica settled into a life most of us can only dream about.
Oh, there won't be snow in Africa this Christmas.
He drove a Porsche.
Yeah.
What man doesn't want a Porsche in Los Angeles?
You're absolutely right.
They were living the life and raising their 2 teenage daughters, Jessica and Isabella.
My own family unit is the most dear to me.
Then came that January day. It was late afternoon. As he sat by the pool, Fabio was stabbed to death. His then 16-year-old daughter, Isabella, discovered his body. To investigators, the Sementilli case started out a mystery. But from early on, they had at least one intriguing clue. From a neighbor's security camera, they could see 2 figures in hoodies running close to Sementilli's house at the time of the murder. A little while later, Fabio's Porsche being driven away. Back then, investigators didn't suspect Monica had anything to do with Fabio's death. She wasn't even home at the time he was killed. Instead, they looked at those 2 hooded figures and thought they seemed a lot like these guys. What do you call these guys?
Well, we call them the knock-knock burglars.
At the time of Fabio's murder in 2017, LA was plagued with break-ins from notorious teams of criminals. So this is LAPD footage.
Yeah, they know what they're doing and they know what they want.
I mean, they're running wild.
Yeah.
They were hitting homes of celebrities all over Los Angeles.
Police say this may have been a case of him being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
At least 7 celebrities had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of jewelry taken.
It was 2017, and for years, the homes of LA celebrities were targeted.
High-profile victims include $300,000 from former Lakers star Derek Fisher, $175,000 for Nicki Minaj, and $2 million from Alanis Morissette's Brentwood home.
They're moving just as quick as they can. In and out in about 3 minutes. They ransack a bedroom, find some jewelry, and get out.
William Dunn, a Los Angeles Police Department detective at the time, had hours of videotape of the knock-knock burglars in action all over wealthy Los Angeles neighborhoods. This one comes from a home just a few miles from Fabio's, months after his murder. They seem to know what to look for.
Right. They're looking for jewelry. They're looking for cash.
Look at him.
Yeah. See, he's checking clothes. He's feeling the clothes to see if somebody's put jewelry or cash in some of the pockets. See, now he's seeing that safe. See, and now he tells his buddy, hey, look at what we found. Now look at how many seconds. And this is a real heavy safe, but they're very determined. They put a lot of effort into it. And it's so heavy, he can't lift the thing, but look at how he's just gonna slide that thing out.
So they got the safe, that's pay dirt, and
gone.
off they go.
Yep, you see they're gone.
To detectives, those 2 hooded figures recorded on a neighbor's surveillance camera near Fabio's house right around the time of his murder looked a lot like the knock-knock burglars. And the Sementilli home had its own cameras. Detectives hoped they would find even more video of those hooded figures on those tapes. There were 4 cameras outside the Sementilli house, but when police came to look for the video, it was gone. A DVR like this was in the garage. It stored all the surveillance. Whoever broke in must have taken it. Strangely, besides taking Fabio's Porsche, that black box was one of the only things stolen from the house, say investigators. Monica told them she thought some inexpensive jewelry and $11,000 in cash was possibly missing. But she wasn't sure, detectives say. The home safe hadn't been touched.
The only thing I thought that was unusual is why didn't they take more? Why didn't they take his watch?
The suspected burglars left behind an $8,000 Rolex on Sementilli's wrist. But within months, the knock-knock burglars began to fade as police suspects because the police were hanging on to a big secret. Nobody except investigators knew it at the time, but they discovered blood at the crime scene that did not belong to Fabio Sementilli. That meant detectives had DNA to work with, DNA that eventually led to a suspect.
We were able to develop forensic evidence. Some of that was DNA, which identified Robert Baker.
Robert Baker. He had been a racquetball league director at a Los Angeles gym, not far from Fabio's house. And Monica's friend Elise knew him. We spoke to her about him in 2018. How would you describe Rob Baker?
He was cool. We all really liked him. He was one of those gym guys, you know.
Elise played in his league.
He was very alpha. He was a very alpha male. There was also kind of a sexually thing about him.
There was something sexual about him.
You know
What do you
how
mean?
some guys just have this sexual kind of, I don't know, he's very manly. He was in shape and he was kind of, you know, kept everything, he was in charge.
He was also tangled up in the porn industry, even doing some acting. Elise didn't know much about Baker's background, but she did hear about his movie career from a friend who happened to spot him in an adult film.
That's like the kind of gossip you just need to tell someone.
Who did you tell?
I told Monica.
Monica was also in Robert Baker's racquetball league.
What was her reaction?
Well, it was pretty anticlimactic, I'll tell you.
Really?
Yeah, because a lot of times when we would have girl talk, she'd get a little prudy, like a little prude.
What Elise didn't know was that Robert Baker was also a registered sex offender.
Robert Baker has a 1993 conviction out of a Long Beach case. It's for lewd and lascivious acts with a minor.
Police say Baker served time for that offense against a teenage girl. For months, police watched Baker and they discovered two things. First, he was definitely not one of the knock-knock burglars. And second, he made thousands of calls and texts to, of all people, Monica Sementilli. In fact, just days after Fabio's death, Monica held a wake in her backyard, and Robert Baker actually showed up.
You did meet him.
I did.
Morella says she saw Monica hanging out with Baker.
I saw her back outside again, the drink, smoking, and talking to this guy. I found out that that was his name, Rob, and she introduced me to him.
Luigi noticed him too.
Robert and Monica were in the corner, talking to each other, sort of away from the party.
And there was something else Luigi noticed about Baker.
He had bandages on his hands.
One guest even snapped these pictures of Monica and Robert Baker together. If you look closely, you can just make out a bandage on Baker's finger. Police would later conclude Baker cut that finger when he killed Fabio, and that's how his blood was at the scene. Detectives visited Monica at home, using what they called a ruse, telling her they were investigating the knock-knock burglars, when in fact, they were investigating her and secretly following Monica and Robert Baker, and according to authorities, it paid off. They say they found evidence that Monica and Baker were having an affair and conspired to kill Fabio.
Over the past several months, investigators have developed information and identified Robert Baker, 55 years old, of Canoga Park, and Monica Sementilli, 45 years old, of Woodland Hills, who was the wife of our homicide victim, as responsible for his murder.
He said, we arrested Monica for the murder of your brother and Robert Baker for the murder of your brother. And I was in shock. I'm like, you sure? You know, I was in shock.
According to the prosecution, these two were plotting and planning to kill Fabio so they could live their life together.
Mary Fulginiti is a former federal prosecutor and a 48 Hours consultant.
It was a very complicated investigation.
As authorities hustled Robert Baker and Monica Sementilli into court, they each pleaded not guilty.
Calling a case of People versus Robert Baker.
But almost 6 years later, Robert Baker changed everything.
When he came to court that day, people were stunned.
Monica Sementilli was being accused of cheating on Fabio with that racquetball coach, Robert Baker, and then along with Baker, planning Fabio's murder.
My instant and thorough and complete reaction was, There's no effing way. I was there. She was decimated.
After months of crying and grieving alongside Monica, Fabio's family couldn't believe it either.
20-some years in my life, she was like a sister. She was a cool aunt to my kids. She was lovable. The whole family felt that way about her.
Then in 2023, Baker skipped trial altogether and pleaded no contest.
Robert Baker pleads no contest, and that's in essence accepting responsibility for the murders. He's ultimately sentenced to life without parole.
The maximum sentence in this case is life in prison without the possibility of parole plus 1 year. You understand this?
Yes, sir.
But while Baker was accepting responsibility for Fabio's death, Monica wasn't.
What he and Monica did to my brother, Fabio, is unforgivable.
But Monica's own daughters, Isabella and Jessica, supported their mom.
We will continue to stand by our mother as we have done for the last 6 years, and we will fight for her innocence.
As Monica prepared to go to trial, her defense attorney, Leonard Levine, made a statement.
We are confident that Robert Baker's guilty pleas and his truthful testimony will finally establish once and for all that Monica Sementilli had nothing to do with the planning or the murder of Fabio Sementilli, her husband.
Monica's defense team wasn't answering questions before trial, so we asked New York-based defense attorney Julie Rindelman to review Monica's defense team's pretrial motions.
There's no witnesses that we know of so far that are going to come forward and testify that she planned this murder.
She says Monica's relationship with Baker doesn't prove anything.
It seems to strengthen the DA's case that not only did she have an affair, but the person she was having the affair with is the killer.
I hear you, but the problem is that simply because an individual is having an affair, you cannot take the leap to get to an individual being responsible for the death of their loved one. Certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt.
But the prosecution says the affair is key to establishing a conspiracy between Monica and Robert Baker, an alleged conspiracy detectives spent months tracking.
How long was that investigation?
5 months, 5 to 6 months.
While the DA also declined an interview before going to trial, former prosecutor Mary Fulginiti reviewed the case against Monica.
So this is the scene of the crime?
Yeah. This is where the two joggers, came, according to the video from a neighbor, running up here toward the house.
Prosecutors say that first hooded figure in the green sweatshirt is Robert Baker.
So what about that accomplice?
We don't know who that person is. It's a mystery.
What does this indictment say about Monica Sementilli?
Yeah, this indictment is a very detailed outline and timeline of the plot to kill Fabio Sementilli. The motive here is simple. I mean, this is love and money. This is one of the oldest crimes in the book where, two lovers desperately wanting to be together, and they try to get rid of one of the spouses so they can be together for what? For financial benefit. And that would mean the $750,000 life insurance policy, the house, 401ks.
Police say the plan was to stage the scene to make it look like the work of the knock-knock burglars and throw police off their trail. And they believe Monica was deeply involved.
They believed she was the one that coordinated everything, the one that showed him, where the house was, where the DVR was, so that he knew where to go to rip it out of the walls, how to get into the house.
And that's not all. The prosecutor says 6 months before the murder, Monica forwarded this email sharing details of her home security system with Baker.
She provided the password, the username, the login credentials, as well as the user manual to Robert Baker the same day that she received it from the surveillance company.
And then there's the day of the murder. Prosecutors say Monica's behavior that day is a key element of her role in the conspiracy to kill Fabio. According to prosecutors, this surveillance video shows Monica left home at 3:26 p.m., driving the family's black Ford F-150 pickup.
This is where she came, according to prosecutors, to establish her alibi.
So a lot happens in this parking lot. She pulls in here in her Ford 150 pickup truck right in front of this store, stops for just a few minutes.
Prosecutors say they have video where it appears an individual gets into Monica's truck. They say that person was Robert Baker. Monica then goes alone into the Target store and begins shopping. But as she leaves, prosecutors say this surveillance photo shows her fixated on her phone. They would tell a grand jury it appears she was streaming video from her home, a lot of it. But what was Monica watching?
How do you think Robert Baker's plea will affect Monica Sementilli's trial? For a look at a timeline of the case, go to 48hours.com.
So what was Monica Sementilli watching on her phone that afternoon, at about the time her husband was being murdered?
The phone records and data show that she's connecting to a unique IP address. It happens to be the IP address of the house. And there's a large amount of data that's being consumed. And that large amount of data is consistent with video streaming, i.e., the surveillance video of the house.
Surveillance video? According to the DA, it might have been video from her home security cameras. But could Monica have been watching the actual murder?
No. The surveillance cameras in the house are facing outside, but they're not facing in the pool area, which was where Fabio was located at the time, so they didn't actually capture the murder. But they would capture, obviously, who was coming and going.
Monica could have been watching everything else, prosecutors say.
They're going to argue she's watching the scene of the crime, to see the comings and goings, like when Baker and the accomplice are going into the house, when are they leaving the house, so that she knows when she can leave here and go home.
Prosecutors say while she's watching the feed, Baker and his accomplice were on the Sementilli property, stalking Fabio.
According to the prosecution, quote, it was a very targeted attack that was done with the intent to kill. They also go on to say that, quote, he was stabbed in the neck. It cut his jugular vein, cut the carotid artery.
And there's more evidence of the plot to kill Fabio. Prosecutors say Baker was planning a future with Monica.
The DA says that about 2 months before the murder, Baker told a friend that he'd been dating this woman for about a year, and that he sent a picture of that woman, and that woman was Monica. And then 2 months later, Fabio was killed.
Authorities also say Monica's behavior after the murder is suspect. She didn't move her teenage daughters out of the house or have her security system repaired.
And the prosecutors argue that the reason why she had no concern, because she knew who the killer was, and she was with him. This is a woman who is pretending to be a grieving widow and making all these posts on social media. Who at the same time is carrying on a torrid love affair with the man who actually killed her husband.
Prosecutors made explicit photos public in court filings. Some we can't show you. They say it's evidence the secretive romance continued after Fabio's death.
I mean, that's a double life. The DA presented a photograph of Monica and Baker to the grand jury, and it was a photograph of Monica actually grabbing his crotch, and this was one that was taken in Vegas.
There was also this photo of a mirror.
Right, and it was a photo of the back of Monica with Mrs. Baker written in lipstick on the mirror.
The lipstick on the mirror, what does that tell them?
Again, this all goes to motive. I mean, Mrs. Baker, she wanted to be Mrs. Baker.
But when detectives asked Monica about Robert Baker, prosecutors say she told them she wasn't even sure of his last name. They say she also told them she wasn't sure how to work the home security cameras.
To quote the prosecution here, they say, quote, she's a liar, she's a manipulator, she's a cheater, and everything that comes out of her mouth has to be taken with a large grain of salt, large enough so that you could choke on it. If they can show that Monica lied about her lifestyle, about the affair, about a variety of other things, that they'll convince the jury that she's also lying about her involvement in this conspiracy to kill Fabio.
And they say when she was later confronted about why Baker's blood was found in her house, she continued to lie.
She comes up with some cockamamie story about, you know, playing racquetball with Baker and hitting him in the finger, and that it was bleeding and there was a bloody towel and she had to bring it home, and that's why his blood was at the house.
But Fulginiti says one of the biggest pieces of evidence against Monica is what happened when police came up with a plan to secretly record the couple. It began when they pulled them over as they were driving.
It's a ruse by the police. They say that they think the car that they're in is stolen, and they wanted to, you know, just check it out, and, you know, probably isn't, and they handcuff them per protocol, put them into the police vehicle. But what they don't know is that vehicle's wired and that there's a van up the street with police in it listening to their every word. And it's at that point Monica says, and I'm going to quote here, "Somebody must have talked. Somebody is doing this to us." And then she said, "They must have something. They must have something." That's pretty damning evidence. As a former prosecutor, that is close to an admission to being involved in this conspiracy.
According to detectives, Monica was also recorded telling her cellmate, "He's not just my lover, he's my confidant, he's my everything." Detectives also intercepted letters Monica wrote to Baker from behind bars, saying, "I'm always amazed how we both know what the other is thinking. Destined. And I miss you so much, my love."
When you look at these pieces in the totality, it's going to put together a pretty perfect puzzle here, and the puzzle will paint this picture that Monica conspired with Baker, that he did not do it alone, that they did it together.
But Monica's defenders say the case against her is flimsy, and they say Baker did it without her.
Robert Baker may have killed him because he wanted him out of the way. Maybe he did it because he hoped that by killing him, he would get Monica to himself. That in and of itself does not establish that Monica was in on the murder.
Monica Sementilli's defense is adamant she had absolutely nothing to do with Fabio's murder.
The defense's position is that there is no hard evidence, actually no evidence, that establishes Monica Sementilli participated in a conspiracy.
And if you can't prove a conspiracy, you can't prove Monica's guilt, says Rindelman.
The sheer number of circumstances that seem to weave together, the parking lot meeting, the walking into the store and watching video that is streamed live from the home, the password being given to the killer. All of those things, the sum of them, wouldn't a jury believe is just too much of a coincidence?
Obviously, I can't answer for what a jury's going to say. The defense, I can promise you, is going to attempt to poke holes in every single piece of evidence you just spoke about.
So let's go step by step. The sharing of that password for the surveillance video.
So there is no question that she shared the password.
But Rendleman says there's no connection between sharing that password and a murder plot.
There's absolutely no evidence between the 6 months that she shared it and the day he was killed that establishes there was any plan in place between them whatsoever to have her husband killed. Not a text, not an email, not a conversation with her best friend saying she's over her relationship. The second issue is there's absolutely no evidence that Robert Baker downloaded the app or ever even used the app.
Let's talk about the actions in the parking lot the day of the murder. Someone appears to be getting into the car.
Keep a couple things in mind. One is, from the defense's perspective, the video footage is so grainy that you can't make out who, if anybody, is getting into Monica Sementilli's car.
And what about the allegation that she was watching video of the house as the murder took place?
Once she went inside the Target, there was a point in time where she seemed fascinated, fixated on her phone.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, the prosecution doesn't know what she was watching on her phone. They cannot articulate, nor will they ever be able to articulate, what was going on in that phone.
But it was being streamed from her home.
She could be watching a show just like any one of us watches a show while we're walking along.
The prosecution really digs in on Monica's character. Fact that she's having an affair.
Well, let me quote what the defense says in regards to that. Quote, the prosecutor's evidence of Ms. Sementilli's affair, and specifically the sexist and lurid manner in which it was presented, was irrelevant, improper, and unfairly prejudicial to Ms. Sementilli. They go on and say the sexual and romantic details of their affair were simply irrelevant to the question whether they conspired to murder Fabio Sementilli.
But then, why lie to investigators, allegedly saying she was unsure of Robert Baker's last name?
The question becomes, why is she lying? Is she lying because she committed a murder, or is she lying because she has been in a tryst with someone for quite a while and doesn't want the world to know, particularly law enforcement?
Prosecutors did find it suspicious that on the night Fabio died, Monica was already inquiring about his life insurance. But Rendleman says it's not odd.
I understand how it could look insensitive to start asking about a life insurance policy so soon after. But if you're an individual that is not financially sound, you have 2 girls at home, you have potentially a mortgage to pay, you have bills to pay, you are going to be worried about the financial security of your family.
And come trial, says Rendleman, what may really help Monica is that she won't be tried with Baker. The jury will not see the man who committed the actual murder at the defense table next to Monica. And that could make the case harder for prosecutors, says Mary Fulginiti.
The fact that he's her lover and the killer, the one that the DNA's around the house. I mean, that there is a spillover effect, and that all would have, potentially impacted, I think, the jury in this case, and he's no longer there.
Would you say it was his last gift to Monica?
Yeah, I would, because there's absolutely no other reason for him actually to plead straight up, without any real plea bargain here, to life without the possibility of parole, except, I guess, his last murderous, chivalrous act.
But it seems Baker may have an even bigger impact on Monica's case. 48 Hours went to see him in jail, and he told us Monica had nothing to do with the murder of Fabio, and she never knew that he was Fabio's killer. Baker also told us that he's no longer in touch with Monica, and he has not decided if he will testify.
Another factor that could help Monica, says Rindleman, the daughters Monica shared with Fabio are standing behind their mother.
And so there's an argument to be made that the jury's looking at the daughter saying, if they believe her after all this, shouldn't we?
As for Monica herself, she's never spoken publicly, except at a memorial for her deceased husband.
How lucky am I to have lived the greatest love story of all time? The story that people only read about. The story that movies are made of. Thank you so much.
Need more time with 48 Hours? Go deep behind every true crime episode with first-hand accounts from 48 Hours Investigations.
Were you at all prepared for what happened in this case?
Shock is the word that comes to mind.
Get inside the twists and turns and get in on the case. Listen to Postmortem from 48 Hours, now available wherever you get your podcasts. Real people. Real crimes. Real life drama.
Brian Brimminger was a typical Marine. That kind of an all-American kind of persona. He was assigned to a color guard in Washington, D.C. There's pictures of him in the White House with President George W. Bush. From the outside looking in, it seemed like Brian Brimminger had everything going for him. In 2011, after having served 7 years in the Marine Corps, Brian Brimminger leaves the Marines. He decides to go to Panama. And his plan is to decompress, take some time off.
My sister was deeply in love with the man named Brian Brimminger. All she wanted was to be with him and love him.
They were so madly in love. I think she was very proud of him because he was a Marine.
She used to say things like, "I'm with a Marine." Yvonne went down to Panama with Brian to start a new life. That's where Yvonne wanted to be. It was perfect. I am Michelle Valenzuela, and my sister is Yvonne Baldelli. She likes to karaoke. She likes to dance.
Did Yvonne like it here?
She love it here. Just love it here. Places with cheap beers and happy hour. It's beautiful. She's got the water right in front of her house.
Where are we right now?
Okay, we're on Isla Carenero in Bocas del Toro. This is the house that they were renting in, Brian Brimminger and Yvonne Baldelli. Yvonne told her family members that everything was good. She painted a very happy picture. Through emails, she made it seem like everything was fine and well. The reality of it was that her and Brimminger were fighting constantly.
After I'd heard stories of the fights, I could understand why she would want to leave.
She fell off the radar screen. She just went away one day. Her emails stopped, her communication stopped. Everybody lost contact with her. There's no immigration records that indicates that she left Panama.
There's no book for this. There's no book for dummies on what to do when your sister has gone missing.
Carenero from the outside appears to be a tropical paradise, but it's a swampy hell.
I call it Devil's Island because some terrible things took place on that island.
Brian Brimminger has done nothing, zero, to help with the search for Yvonne.
We are in Central America, in some jungle, in some swamp, looking for Yvonne.
That through the middle is really deep.
This is unbelievable.
What no one knew is that Brian Brimminger had a secret. He was living a double life.
Brian Brimminger moved to California, hooked up with Kristen Werkhoven, and they got married. Kristen worked at the White House, and that's where she and Brian met.
And his life is going on like normal, and her life will never be the same.
What did you do to her, Brian?
We knew that there had been foul play. We knew he was the last one to see her alive.
Brian's coming out with his golf clubs. Let's go, guys.
And this is what I know.
Okay, you rolling? Let's go.
My sister went down to Panama with Brian Brian returned and my sister didn't.
Brian Brimage was exceptionally arrogant, but what he didn't account for was this family's fervor to find what happened to their daughter and their sister.
Brian, Peter Van Sant with CBS News. We'd like to ask a couple questions.
It's an easy thing to tell the truth. He told a lot of lies. That's what led to his demise.
I'm Peter Van Sant. Tonight on 48 Hours, Devil's Island.
"48 Hours" will be back in 90 seconds.
In the spring of 2012, Brian Breminger was living the high life in Southern California. Just months removed from a decorated Marine Corps career, Breminger was happily married and living in the suburbs.
When I look at the pictures of Brian and Kristen, I just see a couple in love and super sincerely happy and just enjoying the day at the beach in La Jolla.
These joyful newlywed photos of Brian and Kristen Breminger were a shock to Yvonne Baldelli's family. They expected her to be in the picture.
It wasn't their wedding day, but they came in their wedding attire in a limousine and champagne flowing.
Photographer Jack English had no idea of the intrigue behind these happy images, that Brian had proposed to Kristen just days after Yvonne disappeared in Panama.
She looked very happy, very in love, as if she found her Prince Charming.
Prince Charming? A man who had just left Yvonne Baldelli in Panama 2 weeks earlier? How could this happen? We traveled to the remote islands off the Caribbean coast of Panama to find out. Up ahead is the island of Caranero, where Yvonne and Brian, who the locals called Brim, came to live in September 2011. It's a place where they could chase their dream. Why did they decide to go to Panama?
She liked the fact that they could live on the beach, you know, pretty reasonably priced down there.
Yvonne's sister, Michelle Valenzuela, says Brian wanted to become a singer, performing in bars and clubs. With her beloved dog, Georgia May, in hand, Yvonne brought 2 sewing machines in hopes of starting a clothing business. Stepmother, Lillian Faust.
She was going to make bathing suits and sell them to tourists. I knew she was excited, and she didn't have any reservations.
It sounded like she had a real plan for the future.
She did, and she thought that she found her paradise, her perfect place.
Michelle recalls how her younger sister Yvonne, recently divorced, was smitten with Brian when they first started dating in 2009 in Southern California.
I didn't think she was physically attracted to him. That was a big part of it.
And while Yvonne seemed to be falling in love with Brian, big sister Michelle wasn't so sure.
As far as emotionally from my sister, Yvonne would put 100% into you, and she would expect that back. And I didn't get that impression that she was receiving that. That concerned me. She deserved that.
After Yvonne was laid off from her management job with Procter & Gamble and Brian ended his career in the Marines, the two decided to make a fresh start and reinvent themselves in Panama, settling in this house. They quickly fell in with the local expats. Did you think they were in love?
Apparently.
It seems so.
Joan and Stephen Crabtree own the Cosmic Crab, a funky resort and waterfront bar where Brian would sing for his supper.
He played here at the Cosmic Crab a couple of nights a week, and they were frequent visitors here.
They were very nice people.
Penny Tom, owner of another waterfront bar, also let Brian play for food and free booze. Lots of booze.
They used to drink a lot, so they were always happy.
What's a lot?
A lot.
And Jim Mertens says Brian's drinking may have gotten in the way of his singing.
He played the guitar good, but when he started to sing, that's when it went away.
What was it like?
Like a hound dog on a porch.
She looked very happy in the pictures, and she was really enjoying herself there, and I knew it would be a place that she would like.
For Yvonne's father, Jim Faust, the constant stream of joyful phone calls and emails describing the couple's Panama adventures was reassuring.
Yvonne's emails were stories of exactly what her life was like down there, and I could picture it, and I could close my eyes, and it was like I was there. I couldn't imagine the whole thing.
Emails like this one.
She says, "Hi, sis. Brian, already working at local restaurants and bars. We love it. We wake up and go running, then swim in the ocean every morning."
And so Yvonne's family thought all was well in paradise, and that Brian might be the one for Yvonne.
I believed that they were going to get married. That's what I thought was going to happen when they got down there.
But then, right around Thanksgiving 2011, 3 months after they arrived in Panama, the happy emails and calls from Yvonne started to drop off. For Michelle, a sisterly instinct started to kick in.
That's what set me off, was the fact that they were becoming less frequent, the emails from her, and then they stopped completely.
2 weeks passed. Then, on December 14th, Michelle finally got a text. But it wasn't from Yvonne.
There was a number I didn't recognize, and a text message on there said, "This is Brian, may I make arrangements to pick up my truck?"
Michelle was shocked. Brian was back in the U.S.?
I sat up, called that number. For only thing out of my mouth was, "Where's my sister?" He says, "Didn't you get my email?" I said, "I haven't received any emails from anybody. It's been a few weeks." I said, "I'll call you back." So I went to my computer.
Michelle discovered an email she had overlooked. It was from Brian, who had never written before.
The one from him stated, "I'm sure you've heard by now that Vonnie and I are no longer together." I called him right back. So I asked him point blank, "What happened?" And he said they had got in a fight because she had found out that he had a child from somebody else.
That somebody else, Kristen Werkhoven. The two had a baby girl in 2010. Since Yvonne was unable to have a child because of a medical condition, the discovery must have been earth-shattering. Brian then said Yvonne just up and left.
I said, "Did she leave a note?" "No." "Has she tried to call you since?" "No." "Do you know where she's at?" "No." And I said, "I haven't heard from her, Brian." And he said, "Well, I'm sure she's fine."
But Michelle had her doubts about that story. And 10 days later, when Brian called and still wanted to pick up his truck, Michelle said she had another plan.
I said, "When you come to pick up the truck, I'll be here. That's no problem. And I think it's a good idea that you go with me to the police department, since you're the last one to see her, and we can fill out a missing persons report. Because now we're already in mid-December, and I haven't heard anything from her, and that's not right. Something's wrong."
In December of 2011, Michelle Valenzuela was still worried about her missing sister. So she went back to her computer, where she found another overlooked message. This one from Yvonne.
"Hi, sis, just an update. Brian and I are no longer together. I should have trusted my instincts that he is a lying, cheating ass. I'm headed to Costa Rica with a man I met when we first got to Bocas."
What'd you think when you read this email?
I just wasn't sure. There's some things in there that didn't feel right to me.
Her head was spinning. Could Yvonne really have run off with another man after learning that Brian had a love child?
All Yvonne ever wanted to do was be a mother. That's all she ever wanted to do was be a mother. And to find out that Brian had a child, and she sold everything she had to go to the other ends of the world to be with his man, and he didn't tell her about that. I'm questioning what her mental state is right now. She's heartbroken.
In upstate New York, Jim and Lillian Faust also felt the turn of events was just so out of character for their daughter.
For her life to change so abruptly
And she's like, oh, well, I'm going with this guy. And
To Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. That made absolutely, positively no sense to me.
Also making no sense, 3 weeks had passed since Yvonne had emailed from Panama, but then out of the blue, she sent a new email. It was strange.
Miss you and everyone at home. I'm starting to get a little homesick. I'm working on plans to get home as early as the second week of January. I've been living with cliffhangers for a while. Love you, sis, Yvonne.
While strange, the email was also reassuring for her family, who was happy to learn Yvonne would soon return to California.
So I stopped worrying. I figured, okay, she knows that in January we're having a family get-together. She's going to be there.
Do you feel she's safe at this point?
I was still worried, but I was satisfied with it for the moment.
On the same day that email arrived, so too did Brian Brimminger, knocking on the front door of Michelle's LA home to pick up his truck.
What did you see on his face? What was his demeanor like?
He was just in a hurry. He was calm. It was very brief.
All business.
Yes.
Get his stuff, get his truck.
And leave.
After Brian got his pickup truck, Yvonne's emails stopped. 16 long days passed until on January 6th, 2012, Michelle wrote her sister. The subject, worried.
I just want to make sure you weren't kidnapped or someone pretending to be you. Ha ha. There's my paranoid, suspicious mind, or maybe too many 48 hours.
Did you ever hear back from your sister again?
No, that's the last email.
Michelle was still hopeful that she would appear at that family reunion, but Yvonne never showed up.
Well, at that point, when we met it with my dad and I told him we haven't heard from her, he said, oh no, something's wrong. Something's wrong. And I told my dad, she did not leave Panama. That's just my feeling.
By now, Michelle was convinced her sister never ran off to Costa Rica with another man. So her instinct was to learn where Yvonne's emails were really coming from.
So I went to my cousin and asked him to please check it out, because like I said, I haven't got a clue.
The cousin, a technology whiz, said tracking Yvonne's emails would be easy. All he needed was their IP addresses. So he searched the emails Yvonne had supposedly sent from Panama and Costa Rica, as well as that email Brian had sent from near Dana Point, California. The cousin made a startling discovery.
The one from Panama came from Panama. And then the one that was supposed to be with her being in Costa Rica came from the United States.
Where in the United States?
One of them looked like they were coming from Dana Point.
That email, Michelle says, originated from where Brian was now living near Dana Point, California. It was the evidence Michelle had been looking for.
They were sharing the same IP address.
So Yvonne's email is coming from Brian's computer.
Yes.
The family's worst fear had come true. It appeared Brian had hacked into Yvonne's email account and was impersonating her. But why?
That's when I knew that he did something to her. And,
it's not missing person, it's murder now.
It's murder.
I said my sister's dead and I'm never going to see her again.
But Michelle had no time to mourn. She took that new evidence down to the FBI, where she met with Special Agent Andrew Masters.
Michelle Valenzuela, she was a Spitfire. When they brought that to us, we knew that there was absolutely foul play involved.
The FBI immediately launched an investigation into Yvonne's disappearance, with Masters taking charge. Yvonne's family then contacted the State Department.
I call the embassy, and the embassy tells us there is no record of her ever leaving Panama and no record of her ever entering Costa Rica.
Yvonne's family couldn't wait any longer. They traveled to Panama to find answers. The FBI made a move as well, targeting Brian Brimminger as a person of interest.
Brian didn't realize what exactly the FBI is capable of.
With the FBI investigation underway in the States, Yvonne's family met up with legendary investigator Don Winner in Panama City.
Why is it when something goes bad with an American citizen in Panama, you get the phone call?
I've already put away, or helped to put away, 3 serial killers. So when bad things happen, they know that to come to me when they don't know what else to do.
Winner is an ex-U.S. intelligence officer with an uncanny ability to solve murders. Jim and Lillian tell Don the story of their daughter's disappearance and Brian's claim that she's run off with another man.
I think the chances that she's running around in Costa Rica somewhere with some other dude are damn near 0. Here's the deal. This is what happened. This is what we think is going on.
It's not the first time Winner, a CBS News consultant, has worked on a case with 48 Hours.
All right, we're going to go take a look at this yellow trimaran.
The intrepid investigator helped solve the murder of American sailor Don North, as 48 Hours reported in 2011.
Just on a personal side in all of this, can you believe you and I are doing this again?
No, absolutely not. I tell you what, it's amazing.
Winner is convinced Brian Breminger is involved. His strategy, put pressure on the Panamanian government to act.
When Don Winner speaks,
the people listen, yeah.
Winner's game plan also called for Jim and Michelle to give blood for DNA tests should any remains be found. And when Yvonne's family travels hundreds of miles from Panama City to the tropical island where she disappeared, Yvonne Lee Valdelli, the Panamanian police are persuaded to hold a press conference to plead for information.
The family has been experiencing a living nightmare for quite a few months, and we continue to appeal to anyone who knows absolutely anything about Yvonne's disappearance to come forward.
Panamanian police announce for the first time that Yvonne is the victim of foul play and name Brian Breminger as the suspect.
Todos adoramos a Yvonne.
This news conference reverberated around the world.
Police say within weeks of her disappearance, Breminger returned to the U.S., got engaged, and married another woman. Tonight, the FBI is calling him a person of interest.
Riding the momentum of the press conference, they printed flyers, fanned out to neighborhoods, and the village, searching for their own clues. It's a bittersweet search for Yvonne's niece, Lauren Byer, in a place that is no longer a paradise.
There's nothing here for us until we find her. That's why we're here.
But the family's quest is starting to get results. Witnesses who knew the couple come out of the woodwork, describing Brian's verbal and physical abuse.
To me, he was a scary person. He was not the kind of person I wanted to be around.
Local bar owner Jeff Salzman saw it firsthand on Yvonne's face.
As I recall, it was black eyes and blackness around the face and bruises.
Was she self-conscious about it?
She was trying to hide it and not speak of it.
It was very painful to learn that he had hit her, that she had bruises, that she had black eyes. Those things were very difficult to learn.
The realization that Yvonne may have been murdered is setting in.
Where could Yvonne's body have been dumped? Well, just feet in front of that house, you've got thousands of square miles of water. While if you just go not 20 yards from the shoreline, this impenetrable swamp. Try to find something in there.
But that's exactly what Yvonne's family, investigators, and volunteers set out to do. Entering what could be Yvonne's swampy graveyard.
Describe this area that has to be searched. Just how difficult a place is it?
Okay, it's jungle, it's tropical, so you have every kind of bug and critter that you can think of, spiders and snakes, and, you know, it's not a place to go slogging around through.
Struggling through the muck, the spiders, and the rancid water, the smallest discovery raises hope. A purse
No, it's nothing inside.
A medicine bottle, a mysterious sinkhole.
I kept asking myself, I want to find Yvonne, but do I want to find Yvonne? I mean, I want to know where she is, but do I want to see her in these swampy areas?
Then they find a passport.
Yeah, we find a U.S. passport, the front page here.
None of it is Yvonne's. But back in the United States, the FBI confronted Brian Brimmager.
We went and knocked on his door. He answered and invited us in, said that he was expecting us.
FBI Special Agent Andrew Masters questioned Brian Brimmager for more than 4 hours while he babysat his young daughter.
This is Special Agent Andrew Masters along with Special Agent Gabriel Ramirez approaching Apartment M in an attempt to have a consensual monitored interview with Brian Brimmager.
We weren't sure if he was going to break down and confess to having a part in her disappearance and murder, or if he was going to become angry, if he was going to kick us out.
Brian stuck to his story. Yvonne left him for another man.
I come back home and there was a note that said, and I quote, going to Costa Rica with a man I've been talking to, F you ass.
But when confronted with Michelle's email evidence, Brian began to stumble.
Brian, I'm just going to kind of lay it out there, man. The IP addresses are not coming back from Costa Rica or Panama.
Okay.
They're coming back from here. Okay, so.
Here?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if she's not hanging out around here, then somebody sent those emails, right? How did those emails get sent?
Do you know anybody that would have her email account hacked into her account?
No.
Then something caught Masters' eye.
As soon as I walk in, I see a white Sony Vaio.
Which is a computer.
A laptop computer, exactly. And we knew that Yvonne owned a white Sony Vaio laptop that she had taken with her to Panama.
Well, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking we may very well have Yvonne's computer right here.
Masters' hunch was spot on. It was Yvonne's computer. But why was it in Brian's condo? And would it help unravel the mystery of Yvonne's disappearance?
Take the journey with Yvonne's family as they search the jungles of Panama, now at 48hours.com.
Even though he was under the FBI's microscope, Brian Brimmager remained a free man, living with his family on the outskirts of San Diego. Kristen worked for a defense contractor, while Brian, unemployed, spent much of his time golfing.
Recognize that man?
Yes, I do. That's Brian.
In the summer of 2012, we showed Yvonne's sister Michelle video of Brian's new life.
What goes through your mind when you see him?
Well, honestly, it's not surprising now that I know what he's capable of. He thinks he got away with murder. So what you have here is a person who killed my sister and can walk away scot-free.
You ready? Brian's coming out with his golf club.
Let's go, guys. Okay, you roll.
Just a few months after that FBI interview, we came face to face with the suspected killer.
Brian? Peter Van Sant with CBS News. We'd like to ask a couple questions. Would you please talk to us? Did you murder Yvonne Baldelli? You can speak to us. You can answer that question. Brian, why won't you speak with us? Did you have anything to do with her disappearance?
While Brian heads off to enjoy another carefree day on the greens, the FBI was turning his life upside down, interviewing everyone he knew, including his wife, Kristen.
What had Brian told her about why he was living in Panama?
He told Kristen that he is going down to Panama to decompress from after leaving the Marine Corps, and that he was going with some Marine Corps friends.
Did Kristen urge Brian to leave Yvonne?
No, Kristen didn't even know Yvonne existed.
So he lied to Kristen?
Absolutely.
Apparently, all those lies didn't matter to Kristen.
According to her, Brian is the greatest thing to ever happen to anybody.
But that's something she didn't want to share with us when 48 Hours knocked on her door.
Hi, Kristen. Kristen, I'm Ryan with CBS News. Is there any way we can talk?
Meanwhile, as Special Agent Masters took several investigative trips to Panama, a different portrait of Brian Breminger emerged.
We talked to many people that would socialize with him at bars, and we learned about all the domestic violence that he brought upon her, the choking, the dragging, the berating.
After speaking with friends and neighbors of Yvonne and Brian, Special Agent Masters became certain the couple had a violent fight on November 26, 2011. After Yvonne learned that Brian had fathered a child with Kristen.
The argument probably escalated, and at some point, Brian decided he was done with her and he was going to kill her.
Crucial evidence was also discovered on Yvonne's laptop, the very computer Masters saw when he first questioned Brian. About 2 weeks before her murder, Yvonne took this disturbing selfie.
That photo shows a massive black eye on her left eye and swelling in her left cheek.
In a way, from the grave, Yvonne helped you in this investigation.
Yvonne helped us tell the story, yes, absolutely.
And there was more chilling evidence.
We found the Yahoo searches in which he searches how to remove blood from a mattress.
When did he do that?
He did that about 10:30 in the morning, the night after Yvonne was murdered.
Masters discovered even more evidence in Costa Rica, where Brian is seen withdrawing cash from Yvonne's account.
We were able to obtain those ATM photos. So we have Brian using Yvonne's debit card to extract money from her account.
And Masters says there is no doubt that Brian used Yvonne's laptop to send those emails to her family. So we went looking for Brian Breminger again to get answers.
Hey, Brian, I need to talk to you. How do you explain the fact that Yvonne's email that said she was in Costa Rica that she sent to people was actually sent by you from here in California? Can you answer that? You knew she was dead when you sent that email, didn't you? Brian, we really want you to talk to us. Answer some questions. He's never said a word. Never said a word to us. He will not answer any questions.
And what about Yvonne's dog, Georgia May, which had not been seen since she disappeared? Don Winter has a theory.
He knew that she loved that dog, and that if the dog was running around, he knew that anything she said about her taking off with some guy to Costa Rica, everybody would immediately know it was crap. So he had to get rid of the dog too.
In his investigation, Don Winter unwittingly found a key piece of evidence on Brian's Facebook page, where he had sold this machete.
After Yvonne disappeared, Breminger made a comment about that knife. He's like, yeah, that used to be mine. I brought it down with me when I came down from the States. And the chilling part is he made a comment that said, I've only used it to chop up one stripper. That's just chilling.
Special Agent Andrew Masters needs to get his hands on the machete to see if it was used in Yvonne's murder. Incredibly, he was able to track down the person who bought it from Brian in Panama.
This is the machete that Brian bought in the United States and took down with him to Panama.
Can you pick it up for me?
Sure. It's very heavy, it's weighted, and it would inflict a lot of damage.
Investigators had the machete, they had the email, and they had caught Brian in multiple lies. Soon, someone would stumble upon the most important evidence of all.
Don Winter shares some of the details of his investigation, now at 48hours.com.
We seek answers, justice, and help.
Summer 2013. Nearly 2 years have passed since Yvonne Baldelli's disappearance.
You feel like you're reading a book, a terrible mystery or murder mystery, and there's no end to it.
On June 26, 2013, the final chapter of this mystery began to unfold.
A former Marine who family members say murdered his girlfriend before...
FBI Special Agent Andrew Masters slapped the cuffs on Brian Breminger.
What did you say to him?
You're under arrest. He said, turn around, put your hands behind your back. He needed to answer for his crime.
How did you learn that Brian had been arrested?
Truth be told, I received a text from my dad, said they got the SOB. And I sat down in a sense of relief because now they believed us.
Brian Breminger was charged with 13 felonies relating to the cover-up of Yvonne's death, but not murder. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Shane Harrigan and Mark Conover were lead prosecutors.
At that point, without having found the body, we didn't have quite enough to bring the murder charge.
But that would soon change.
Human remains have been found on a Panamanian island.
A local worker clearing some brush on the island where Brian and Yvonne lived came upon this duffel bag.
And when he unbuckled the clasp, he found Yvonne's skeletonized remains. By the time she was found 2 years later, it was only bones.
A DNA test confirmed it was Yvonne. Her remains were found just a few hundred yards from where the family had spent days searching.
I wanted to tell Michelle personally.
When I first heard the possibility that they found Yvonne, my first reaction was, for me, it's good news because I just feel good. We can nail this bastard.
While the family's prayers had been answered, an autopsy confirmed the hellish fact that Yvonne had been dismembered.
This is the actual device that was used to dismember Yvonne.
The most likely cause of death was being stabbed in the back at least twice.
Despite overwhelming evidence and proof that Breminger had repeatedly lied, his wife Kristen continued to stand by him.
Kristen, may I ask, do you still believe in your husband's innocence? Can you just tell us that?
Don't touch the camera.
Then, for Yvonne's family, another cruel tragedy struck in the spring of 2014. Michelle, who had dedicated her life to finding justice for her sister, now faced another deadly enemy. She was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer.
I'm still alive to fight for my life, and I'm still alive to fight for my sister.
This was Michelle in June of 2014. And this was her just 3 months later.
Today, I'm going to be giving a deposition.
Weakened by cancer and given just weeks to live,
Do you solemnly swear or affirm?
Michelle, a crucial witness, agreed to tell her story while she still could. Brian Breminger would sit directly across from her.
I'm going to try to ignore him as best I can.
And who is Brian Breminger?
The defendant.
Do you see him in the courtroom here today?
Yes, I do.
Would you please point to him and describe where he is seated for the record?
He's sitting at the end, khaki outfit, at the end.
Michelle passed out after the exhausting testimony. It was a courageous act of love for her sister.
This might be the last thing I get to do for her. Over and over and over again, because it'll be on camera forever.
Days later, she died. It took years of diplomatic and legal wrangling, but in early 2015, the government of Panama finally agreed to let Brian be tried for murder on American soil.
We came to the conclusion that the only way that Brian Breminger would face justice for his murderous act is if he was charged and convicted here in the United States.
Brian pleaded not guilty. The case was heading for trial in 2016 when investigators made another dramatic discovery. Yvonne's blood and DNA were found under the machete's handle.
So these 3 screws were undone. The handle opens up, and inside they find blood.
Right, they removed these 3 and just pulled it out here and conducted the testing on the blade and the interior portion of the handle and found blood.
Whose blood?
Yvonne's.
Yvonne Baldelli's.
Yvonne Baldelli.
This now is a slam dunk. You know that this is the tool used to dismember her.
It was that made Brian finally realize he was not going to get out of he was not going to lie his way out.
It's over.
It's done.
He had cleaned the blade, but he hadn't cleaned underneath the handle. And it was that additional evidence that I believe eventually led Mr. Breminger to plead guilty.
Within a week, Breminger pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, while the other charges were dropped. And later at his sentencing, finally admitted, after nearly 5 years of lies, to killing Yvonne Baldelli.
And I think if you look up in the dictionary, evil, and you see Brian's picture in there, he's the ultimate incarnate of evil in my mind.
In open court, Breminger apologized to Yvonne's family, but his words rang hollow.
Brian Breminger is a con artist. He had our daughter conned. He had his new wife conned. He had her family conned. He was able to live a double life, sometimes a triple life, and people buy what he says. But his actions show that he's not the person he says that he is.
Brian was sentenced to 26 years in federal prison. With the case over, Yvonne's remains were returned to her family. And laid to rest at sea.
To get her remains back and be able to give her a dignified resting place, I can sleep better at night knowing that she's not rotting in some jungle or deep in the ocean somewhere, knowing that she loved the ocean, knowing that we were able to put her in a place that she loved.
We brought her home, and I know that that was thanks to a lot of work of a lot of unsung heroes. I know.
In a way, 2 people were honored this day, Yvonne and her beloved sister Michelle, who battled a Marine to the end and won.
She's definitely a hero. She never gave up. To her dying day, she gave all she had.
Kristen and Brian Breminger are still married. She continues to support and visit him in federal prison. Breminger's prison term ends in February 2037. Help us solve this crime.
It was a savage murder.
A stunning model.
She was quite the trophy.
Married to a multi-millionaire.
This is where the assailant got her from behind, knocked her to the ground.
They slit her throat.
8 years, no arrest.
And there are no fingerprints.
No, nothing at all.
There are clues. The sketch.
Who is this? Is this the guy that murdered my sister?
The letter.
And now that was a shock. Cut out in little bitty, individual, different letters. I mean, why are you talking to me? I want to find out who murdered my sister.
CBSN, CBS News, always on.
Now approaching the entranceway via the front door. In the family dining room area, we see what appears to be a large pool of blood.
I learned never let anyone's emotions cloud your vision when you're investigating a crime.
A hammer covered with what appears to be blood.
And never jump to any conclusions
Semi-automatic handgun.
until you've had plenty of time to think about it.
I had seen many crime scenes where there was a lot of blood and gruesome sights, but none that bad. I was at the Springfield Police Department in the major case office, and I heard the radio call.
911 emergency, emergency. Emergency, emergency. This man just, he hit my wife. I shot him. Please help me.
Detective Cox, who was my partner at the time, drove.
And dispatch advises that the second victim that was at the scene was actually believed to be the intruder, and that the husband had shot the intruder.
Help me.
What's the problem?
I just shot this man in my house.
He's inside your house right now.
He beat my wife.
He had the hammer in his hand, and he was standing over her. And I was like, oh my God, Donna, oh my God.
Are you Mark Winger?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
And your wife is Donna?
Yes, she is. I gotta get to my wife. Please, just let me get to my wife.
Springfield is a beautiful little town. It's Midwestern, it's small, the people are sweet, and it's just a lovely place.
It's a very friendly and clean city with very sensitive and compassionate people.
My name is Sarah Jane Drescher, and I am Donna Winger's mother. Mark and Donna were just so happy.
We don't know where she's sleeping tonight.
I mean, she was just so enthused. I mean, that's all there was to it, to be a mommy. I mean, that was the best for her.
She's beautiful.
My name is Ira Drescher, and I am Donna Winger's stepfather. Mark told the police basically what had transpired. Here he was 31 years old with a 3-month-old child, and he had to shoot a man. My gosh, our hearts bled for him.
I don't think there was ever anyone who met her who couldn't love her.
Say hi.
Who would want to hurt such a beautiful person?
Where's the man at? He's laying on the floor.
From every case, you learn something. And this one taught me, you never take anything at face value, nothing.
He was killing my wife.
Invitation to a murder. Tonight's 48 Hours Mystery.
Emergency, emergency. Please help me. My God, my wife's breathing.
Okay, you need an ambulance?
I need everything. I need everything.
Mark Winger was calling from his own home after his wife Donna was attacked on a hot August afternoon in 1995.
Who is this man?
I don't know who he is.
So many of the good things have been stripped away from me.
Almost everyone who knew Mark and Donna Winger,
They were terrific together.
Adorable.
She was crazy about him.
thought they were perfect together.
They were absolutely an adorable model couple.
They were both respected and successful members of their community. Mark was a nuclear engineer for the state of Illinois. Donna was an operating room technician.
I would like to just say hello to Donna and Mark.
And both sets of in-laws were delighted when the couple got married in 1989.
Donna, Mark, we love you so much.
The Wingers were eager to start a family. But there was a problem. They learned Donna could not bear children.
excited. She hasn't slept for days.
So when Donna and Mark adopted a baby girl in June 1995, they were elated.
I mean, my heart was just pounding. I just couldn't believe it.
Here's Grandma Drescher holding our little baby.
Mark and Donna doted on their daughter.
Are we on, Daddy? And here's Deanne.
There's Deanne.
Here's Aunt Deanne.
And they showed her off to everyone, especially Donna's best friend, Deanne Schultz.
Donna was really special, very friendly, real exuberant, full of life.
But just 3 months later, the good times ended abruptly. It all began when Donna returned from a visit to her mother and stepfather in Florida.
When I kiss them goodbye, the last thing I always say is tell the pilot to drive carefully. And I kissed her, and off she went.
Donna Winger and her baby arrived here at the St. Louis airport and got into a shuttle van for the hour-and-a-half-long ride back home to Springfield.
It was an unusual drive with an unusual driver. A man named Roger Harrington, who'd been working for the van company for 6 months.
The guy scared her. She said that he was very frightening. He said things about killing people, setting car bombs, mutilating people.
Harrington was also speeding.
He was telling Donna that sometimes while he drives, this god-like character would come to him, pull him out of his body, and he would be flying above the trees.
She and the baby made it home, but Donna was very rattled.
She was scared enough to tell me that she was very uneasy and scared to be alone.
Mark Winger complained to Roger Harrington's boss.
I blew up at him, told him about, his van driver speeding, with my wife and my baby, the inappropriate things he was saying.
Then, less than a week after Donna's wild ride, Winger says he was on his treadmill in the basement when he heard a thump.
You come up the stairs and it's very dark in that stairwell. I'm just starting to hear crying from, sounded like the bedroom.
The baby, he says, was alone in the master bedroom, and there were strange sounds coming from the dining room.
Instantly, I knew that that wasn't right at all. I just grabbed my gun and started going down the hall.
Winger says when he came down this hallway, he saw one of the most horrifying things any husband could see. His wife was on the floor here in the dining room. There was a stranger over her, bludgeoning her with a hammer.
You can't imagine it. You can't. When I came down the hallway, I had my weapon pointed at him and I went to pull the trigger.
And that's when Winger says he shot the man in the head. When police got to Winger's house, the victims were in terrible shape, but alive.
The male was taking real deep, labored breaths, and I thought his time was limited.
As paramedics went to work, Officer Dave Barringer got his Polaroid camera.
So I thought, if we're going to have pictures with showing where the bodies were located, I'm going to have to take these pictures now because they're going to be gone within a matter of a few minutes.
He showed us how quickly he took pictures. 3 pictures.
I only had 3 pictures left in my camera.
Within minutes, both Donna and the man were rushed to the hospital.
I just knew that she was in dire straits.
And Mark Winger began telling police what happened that day.
And I was like, oh my God. I said, Donna, oh my God.
I've been in crime scene work a long time, and there's been very few as severe and bloody as this one was.
Homicide Detective Charlie Cox knew there was little hope that either Donna Winger or the man lying near her on the floor would survive their wounds.
I said a prayer. I do that at all my homicides. I stand over the body and
say a little prayer.
Yeah.
Cox grabbed the man's ID from his wallet, and then he got right to work, questioning Mark Winger in the bedroom.
I was in shock. I was in shock the whole time they were questioning me. I did my best.
And he's more or less rocking back and forth as he's talking to us. And you can tell he's nervous and upset. So I'm trying to be as delicate as I can with my questions.
Winger told the detectives the hammer was his, left out by Donna as a reminder to hang a hat rack. And he had a question of his own.
He said, "Who is that guy out there? Is his name Roger?" At that point, I felt compelled to let him know the truth. And I said, "Yes, that's Roger Harrington." He says, "Oh my God, that's the guy that's been harassing my wife and me."
Oh my God. And I fell over on my side and just cried.
Harrington was the van driver who drove Donna home from the airport 6 days before. Winger told Cox about that harrowing ride. He also told Cox about 2 anonymous phone calls that Winger believed were from Harrington.
I thought I was going to jail because I just shot a man in the head.
But Winger could not have been more wrong.
I tried to console him.
The police had all but cleared him. They didn't consider him a killer. They considered him a victim.
At least here, in my mind, you're somewhat of a hero. I said, "You've killed the person who was killing your wife." I said,
You said he was a hero?
Yes.
Cox's partner, Doug Williamson, helped to calm Winger.
I was trying to let him know what we were going to do, how the police were going to help him.
After Donna and Harrington were taken away, Winger managed to give the detectives a detailed statement. He told them that Donna was on her knees when he took aim at Harrington.
Harrington looks up at him.
Yes,
and he
shoots him because he's getting ready to go down and hit her again. And then Harrington, from what the position he was in, he said at that point he fell off of his wife and rolled back.
Like that.
Cox's investigation of the crime scene backed up Mark's story.
Basic evidence in here where the crime occurred matched up with what he was saying.
Everything matched up. There was blood where Donna was killed. There was blood where Harrington's head landed. And
the gun was on the table as he said it was from when he called 911.
What's more, Harrington had been a psychiatric patient with a history of delusions. And Cox knew him. He once broke up a fight between Harrington and his wife.
He had her bent over the couch getting ready to hit her again when I grabbed him.
Harrington seems to fit the profile of a murder suspect pretty well.
Very well.
Harrington died shortly after arriving at the hospital, and Donna died minutes later. She never regained consciousness.
Oh my God.
I felt deeply for him. I'm a very religious person. He seemed to be that as well.
Donna's mother and stepfather, Sarah Jane and Ira Drescher, were inconsolable when they heard about her murder.
I had to hold her because she was wailing, howling, wailing.
They were shocked to hear that Donna's ride from the airport had escalated into a homicide.
She's a good girl.
Was she scared by this driver?
She wasn't scared. No, she wasn't scared. She was just disturbed in a way, you know, that this was such a crazy conversation.
Ira and Sarah Jane rushed to their son-in-law's side.
We felt terrible for him. He's lost his wife also, and then he had to turn around and shoot a man.
He was crying, and I said, "Mark, I know you did the best you could, and I love you very much."
It was an open and shut case. One day after Winger shot Roger Harrington, the prosecutor announced his conclusions.
Mr. Winger acted in self-defense when he shot Mr. Harrington, and therefore at this time no charges will be filed against him, and I anticipate that there will never be any charges filed against Mr. Winger.
Yeah, I was fine with that.
Case closed.
Case was closed before then.
There was an outpouring of support for Mark here in Springfield. Almost everyone believed he was a good family man whose life had been shattered by a madman. But one family wasn't buying that story at all. Roger Harrington's family. What were you trying to tell the police?
I was trying to tell him there is no way. You guys are so wrong. I knew he was not capable.
Harrington's sister, Barbara Howell, pleaded with Detective Cox.
He was very rude, very rude. Oh, very rude. He said, ma'am, anytime you want to know how your kid brother walked in that home, snapped, and killed that woman, come to my office and I'll show you step by step.
Roger's mother, Helen, felt the shame of a city that believed she had raised a psychotic killer.
Just felt branded like, who are we? You know.
You felt branded?
How would anybody feel if their son was called a murderer?
The Harringtons bore their grief quietly, believing they were alone. They didn't realize that someone else doubted Winger's story, someone close to the investigation.
How convincing was Mark Winger that night and the night after?
It was very convincing.
Detective Doug Williamson.
Were you convinced?
No.
Williamson had a lot of questions. Why would Donna leave her baby alone on her bed and open the door to Harrington, a man she supposedly feared?
Roger Harrington was allowed into the house. There was no forced entry. Somebody let him in.
And Harrington parked right in front of the Winger home, leaving behind a piece of paper with a puzzling message.
I saw that there was a note on the front seat, and it had Mark Winger's name, his address, and 4:30 p.m. He says he doesn't know Roger Harrington, has never met him, and he does not indicate any appointment when I have already seen the note, which indicates an appointment.
There's always things in every homicide that don't fit.
So what did you do with those things that bothered you?
Just let them bother me, like they always do.
Cox saw no reason to doubt that the nuclear engineer justifiably shot a disturbed intruder. But Williamson wanted to investigate further. His bosses turned him down flat.
They discounted everything I said.
How did they discount it?
They just said the case is going to be closed, that's it.
And that's the way it stayed for 3.5 years. Until...
You didn't know what she wanted to say.
No.
But you knew it was going to be big.
Yes.
A surprise witness came forward. Everyone in Springfield, Illinois knew Mark Winger's story. It was heroic and heartbreaking. But Detective Doug Williamson had never believed one word of it.
I was argumentative. I pointed out what we call red flags, pieces that don't seem to fit.
At first, Williamson couldn't even convince his own partner, Charlie Cox, that Winger was a murderer. But Cox says he started getting suspicious when Winger kept showing up here at the police station. A few months after the murder, Winger came by to ask for his gun back.
I released the gun back to Mark, and we sat and talked for about a half hour.
What did you talk to him about?
Just things in general. He was wanting to know how the case was going, and as far as I was concerned, he should have just accepted it was closed.
Winger denies it, but Cox remembers him dropping by a second time, this time to say he was getting remarried to his daughter's new nanny, whom he had hired just 5 months after Donna's murder.
And he kept coming in. I kept feeling like he was trying to find out if we were checking into anything. And I went back to Doug and said, something's wrong here, big time.
Winger's behavior was making Cox believe that his partner had been right all along. He thought about the problems in the case, like that note in Harrington's car. And now Cox also wanted the case reopened, fearing that Mark Winger had duped the police.
And the bosses said, no way. We're not going to open a case of this magnitude with your gut feeling and embarrass the department and embarrass Mr. Winger.
As the years passed, Mark's new wife adopted his child, and they had 2 other children. And then, all of a sudden, the whole case got turned on its head.
We got a lucky break.
What was that?
Deanne Schultz.
Deanne Schultz was Donna's best friend,
Here's Aunt Deanne.
There's Deanne.
and she was deeply troubled.
I was hospitalized. I started drinking. I tried to overdose. I wanted to die.
For 3.5 years, Deanne had kept a secret, and what she was finally ready to say would change everything.
I know the police think that he didn't do it, but they maybe if they knew a little, just a little bit that I knew, there could be an investigation.
So she said that her and Mark had been having an affair.
It was a shock to everyone, especially Cox, who right after Donna's murder had written, "It was very apparent that he and his wife were very much in love, and that this should have never happened." And now Deanne Schultz, just like that, says we were having an affair?
Yes.
Well, what did you make of that, Detective?
I said, we got the evidence we need.
Deanne told them the affair began a month before Donna's murder and continued a few months after she died, until Winger ended it.
It was an enormous burden.
You sort of wanted to unload this information?
Yes.
And she dropped an even bigger bombshell. She told police Mark wanted out of his marriage so badly, he had talked about killing Donna.
He mentioned that it would be easier if Donna just died.
Deanne said Winger suggested that she could play a role.
Daddy's feeding you.
He had said that he would be out of town, and he mentioned me coming and finding Donna. That was the gist of the conversation.
Her body.
Yes. And I said, you're crazy.
And Deanne said Winger even talked about the van driver, Roger Harrington.
According to Deanne Schultz, he told her he had to figure out a way to get him into the house.
My impression was that he was gonna give him a hard time and make sure he never messed with his family again.
Winger admits he had an affair with Deanne.
I was a good husband to Donna. I made a mistake. I'm human. It was stupid and it was wrong.
But he denies everything else she said. You said to her, you wish Donna was dead,
That's a horrible, horrible lie.
Did you ever say that to her?
No.
You never said that it would be easier if Donna would just die? At the time, Deanne says she didn't take Winger's comments seriously. But as the years passed, she felt mounting pressure from her own conscience.
I wish that she would have lived and I would have died. I would have traded places.
Why did you feel that?
Because she didn't deserve to die. She shouldn't have died.
With Deanne's dramatic revelation, the case was finally reopened.
Looking at it.
The detectives went straight to the old files and found yet another surprise. Those 3 Polaroids taken by Officer Barringer. Well, did you look at them in '95?
No.
Why not?
Didn't know they existed.
The Polaroids were taken before Donna and Harrington were moved to the hospital, but were never shown to investigators. When the detectives finally saw these photos, they were flabbergasted.
It didn't take but 10 seconds. It was a smoking gun.
It was the smoking gun. Why?
Roger Harrington's body, the placement of that body in that photo, blew Mark's story out of the water. It was over. Roger Harrington's head and feet were in the opposite way of what Mark told us happened.
Please help me.
In the chaos, detectives did not have time to note for themselves where Donna and Harrington lay before paramedics rushed them to the ambulance. To understand why the police now thought Winger had to be lying requires a little forensic fancy footwork. Charlie Cox went with us to the Winger's old house to demonstrate.
The story that Winger told is Mr. Harrington would have been lying basically like this.
Because he would have fallen backwards
He would have fallen
when
backwards
he was shot and landed that way.
here.
Remember, police said Winger told them when he shot Harrington, Harrington fell backwards off of Donna. So how was he found?
He was actually completely
180
degrees a different direction.
Police believe it could not have happened as Winger said.
He would have had to completely do a flip and land over here.
Land how?
Land like this.
So he would have.
And it's physically impossible with a .45 caliber round to have done that flip.
Barringer's 3 Polaroids were becoming the centerpiece of the case.
How could nobody tell you that there were Polaroid pictures of the crime scenes? I mean, we're talking about the only 3 pictures of the bodies as they lay.
I agree.
How does that get lost?
Got overlooked. And in a case where it was as closed as fast as this one was, it was never thought of again. This thing was closed by the 10:30 news that night for all practical purposes.
4 years after the crime, the detectives had no doubt that they had botched the original investigation. They had allowed Mark Winger to get away with murder by pinning the crime on the obvious suspect, Roger Harrington.
Roger Harrington was a perfect patsy to set up for this crime.
Police believe Mark Winger began methodically plotting the double murder immediately after Donna's bizarre ride with Harrington on the way home from St. Louis.
It's a perfect guy to seize on to make it look like an intruder had come in and killed his wife.
He fits Winger's purposes perfectly.
Correct.
Front door. The detectives could not afford any more errors. After Deanne Schultz came forward, it took them 2 more years to cover every detail and put together a murder case against Mark Winger. Finally, 6 years after his wife Donna was killed, Winger was arrested and put in jail awaiting trial.
Being a religious man like I am, I haven't gloated on that. I'm just glad that we've got the right guy in jail, that he didn't get away with it.
You haven't gloated, not even the
Yes, I did.
tiniest bit?
I'm not a perfect Christian. I'm not a perfect Christian.
Detective Charlie Cox, who once called Winger a hero, is now intent on proving him a cold-blooded murderer and vindicating the innocent man who was killed.
I hurt the Harrington family a lot. They buried him as a murderer, and yeah, that bothered me a lot.
But Mark Winger is just as determined to prove that the police got it right the first time.
Roger Harrington killed my wife. I saw it with my own eyes.
I am just so sad.
How could a normal human being do something like this?
Nearly 7 years after Donna's death, Sarah Jane and Ira Drescher came to Mark Winger's trial knowing the evidence against him was strong, but still clinging to the hope that something would exonerate him.
Why were you so eager for him to prove that he didn't do it?
Because we loved him. Because he was part of our family, because Donna loved him, because they appeared to have such an incredibly wonderful marriage.
Did you kill Donna with that hammer?
No, I did not.
Mark Winger is a cold-blooded, calculated, deceitful person that planned and staged this event.
The prosecution team, led by John Schmidt, said Winger lied from the beginning, even during his 911 call.
I just saw this man in my house. Who is this man? I don't know who he is.
It was a lie.
They say Winger knew very well who that man was. He invited him to his house, and that was the crux of their case.
The question of the case in a lot of ways is very simple. What's Roger Harrington doing in the house? The evidence was very clear that it was a meeting that was set to lure Harrington into the home.
If it's a meeting, it's a murder.
Ray Duffy, who owned the airport van company, provided the crucial link for the prosecution.
It was obvious that he wanted to talk to the driver direct.
Duffy testified that Winger called to complain about Harrington's behavior during the ride and afterwards.
He just wanted to talk to this driver and tell him to leave his family alone.
Winger claimed Harrington was making anonymous phone calls to Winger's house.
So he wanted to talk to Roger Harrington?
Yes.
Was that unusual?
Yes, it is. Usually, when people have a complaint, they just call the office.
And Duffy said Harrington was eager to work things out.
I explained to him that Mr. Winger wanted to talk to him, and he said, that's fine, give him my number and have him call me.
Mark called Roger Harrington, set up an appointment for 4:30.
But police believe there's one thing Winger didn't plan for when he lured Harrington to his house. That note Detective Williamson found in Harrington's car.
If Mark would have told us there was a meeting and the guy went berserk in the house, this case probably would still be closed. It would be done, but he didn't.
When Harrington went in the house, police say not only was he unarmed,
Mr. Harrington had a coffee mug and a pack of cigarettes.
He left a far more deadly object behind.
Roger Harrington had a tire iron fashioned as a weapon in his car. If he was going there to bludgeon someone, he had a weapon in his car. Yet he chose a weapon from inside the house that he would have no idea was there.
What do you think happened?
I think that Roger Harrington showed up. They were seated at the table in the dining room, and he held a conversation. At some point, Mr. Winger shoots Roger Harrington in the head. I believe that Donna was in the bedroom because she didn't want to be around Roger. She comes running out of the bedroom to see what had happened. Mark Winger picks up a hammer. He strikes her several times.
Untangling the evidence in this 7-year-old case was a huge job for the jurors.
You wanted to believe he was innocent.
The timeline of everything going on.
I just got chills thinking about it.
3 of them sat down to talk to us. The defense told them that, unlike Winger, who was successful and a respected member of the community, Roger Harrington had a troubled, violent past.
Here is some testimony that really does make Roger look guilty. I mean, Roger was weird. Roger showed up at their house. You know, there were some phone calls. It could have been him.
The defense also pointed out that at the time of the murder in 1995, detectives had the Polaroids, they had the note in the car. In fact, they had all the same evidence that they now found so incriminating against Winger.
Trained professionals saw this same scene we saw, and they closed the case the next day.
Deanne Schultz, who was given immunity, provided the only new evidence, testimony that Winger had talked about killing his wife. But she had attempted suicide 4 times and had undergone electroshock therapy. The defense called her unreliable.
Roger Harrington killed my wife.
The jurors knew what was at stake. By now, Winger and his new wife had 4 children, including the baby he and Donna adopted.
To tear him away from his family, I had a hard time with that.
But Roger Harrington's family was looking for justice.
Were you sure that your son didn't do it?
Oh, I know he didn't do it.
No matter what the decision was, one family would feel more pain.
Were you leaning one way or another?
No.
No.
After nearly 2 weeks of testimony, Sarah Jane and Ira Drescher are overwhelmed by the evidence against Mark Winger.
And what is so hard to understand is that the way he murdered Donna was so vicious and so violent.
Roger Harrington's family hopes to clear his name.
I was praying. I kept going, Raj, if you're up there, you hear me. Bring us something good. Bring us something so that, you know, Mom and Dad can sleep good tonight.
The jury deliberated for 13 hours before reaching its verdict.
I knew the moment they walked out the door.
I remember seeing the jury coming in. I remember my heart feeling as though it was going to come out of my chest.
I can hear Judge Zappa's voice. We, the jury, find the defendant, Mark Winger, guilty.
It is the verdict that the Dreschers both hoped for and dreaded.
Yes, and Papa Ira's getting a look now.
Confirmation that they'd been betrayed and deceived
Daddy's feeding you.
by a man who had been part of their family.
Smile for the camera, sweetie.
I have no idea why he did it, and I think I will never understand why he did it. And I think it's a question that will never be answered in my mind.
Winger's parents, who had spent a small fortune defending their son, were stunned by the verdict.
We believe in the absolute innocence of our son. We got the best help we could. Inside, we're dying by inches.
The jurors say the case against Mark Winger was clear, and they believe Deanne Schultz.
She was very emotional up there. She loved Mark at the time. I think she was sincerely telling us the truth.
I feel free. I didn't realize just how powerful secrets can be.
But ultimately, the jurors say the state's best evidence was the first evidence police ever collected. Those 3 Polaroids.
Did the defense offer any acceptable explanation to you about how the bodies ended up in the position that they were?
No, there was no explanation.
Mark Winger didn't offer any explanations because he didn't testify. But 5 months after the verdict, he spoke with 48 Hours at a prison in Pontiac, Illinois. He now claims that he personally saw the paramedics move Harrington, although they all denied that at trial.
The bodies had been moved before the Polaroids were taken?
Absolutely.
Why should we believe you?
Why should you not believe me?
Because a jury didn't. What's the best evidence of your innocence?
The fact that I had a wonderful marriage. Everybody knows I had a wonderful marriage with Donna.
But Winger cannot explain the note in Harrington's car.
The thing is, I can't offer you any answers to, why Roger Harrington had 430 written on a note.
Harrington's family says the meaning of that note has always been clear. Roger went to Winger's home because Mark Winger invited him.
Did you feel vindicated?
Yeah.
Yeah? How are you doing now?
Pretty good, I guess.
Does it still hurt?
Sure it hurts. Yep, sure does.
Are you embarrassed?
Oh, yes.
Are you?
Very much so.
Former lead detective Charlie Cox says he learned a valuable lesson.
How close did he come to getting away with murder?
Very close.
Instead, Mark Winger was sentenced to life in prison, which could have been the end of this story. Except it wasn't. In spring 2005, an inmate at the prison in Pontiac came forward and said that Winger tried to involve him in a murder-for-hire plot.
I knew in my head that he was a murderer, but my heart had a hard time believing it still.
The intended victim was Deanne Schultz. And Winger's plot was so complicated, you might say twisted, that it took 19 handwritten pages and hours of secretly recorded conversations to spell it out. Deanne would be kidnapped and forced to write and record lengthy statements, all scripted by Winger, saying that she lied, made everything up, and believes Winger is innocent. Then she'd be killed. Winger's notes covered everything. Only Deanne's fingerprints can be on the tape cassette, letters and envelopes. Her saliva must be found on the stamps. And Winger asked for one more victim, if possible.
Oh, by the way, if there's any money left over, kill Ira Drescher also, because he's the son of a gun of a father-in-law that I dislike.
In June 2007, Winger stood trial in a Pontiac, Illinois courthouse. He told jurors the whole thing was a fantasy he never planned to carry out. Ira Drescher was there.
He was chained by his hands and he was chained by his feet, and I looked at him straight in the eye and I said, "Mark, your miserable life is over."
This time, the jury took less than 3 hours, including lunch. Mark Winger was convicted of soliciting murder and sentenced to another 35 years.
I've always been afraid that he would get out on some technicality. Now I know that he will never be free.
With Winger locked up for good, Sarah Jane and Ira Drescher are dedicated to keeping Donna's memory alive.
Donna really was the ultimate victim of spousal abuse. I had to find a way to keep her spirit going.
And they do that by helping other abused women, raising money for a charity named for Donna.
We established a fund at Women in Distress.
And not only do we help the women, we help the children.
Smile.
And that is all in Donna's spirit.